A distracted cleaning lady accidentally bumped into an elegant man, and he fell madly in love with her beauty. Before we start, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It's always special to see how far these stories can reach. And if you love real, emotional love stories, subscribe to the channel. That way, you help this project grow and share even more inspiring stories with others. It was a chilly autumn morning in Chicago. The wind whipped around the glass-covered corners of the Lancaster Grand Hotel, one of the most luxurious in the city, where top-level executives, influential politicians, and discreet celebrities moved in impeccable silence. Valeria Cruz, 27 years old, was rushing through the main lobby hallways with a mop in hand and a head full of bills and worries. Her navy blue uniform showed signs of wear, and her white sneakers were stained with cleaning products. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and her face, delicate as it was, showed visible dark circles from sleepless nights. But there was something in her expression, a mix of dignity and sadness, that drew attention without her even realizing it. "Valeria, finish that floor now! The branch manager from New York showed up early," the supervisor shouted over the radio. Valeria nodded silently, trying to speed up while drying the shiny floor. Distracted, focused on not leaving any marks, she took a wrong step as she came out from behind one of the lobby columns and ran into someone. The impact was light, but enough to make her bucket fall and dirty part of the Persian rug that adorned the entrance. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, sir," she exclaimed, kneeling quickly to clean up, not even looking at the person she had bumped into. The voice that answered was unexpectedly calm. "It's all right. Don't worry." Only when she looked up did she see him. William Lancaster, 34 years old, heir to the hotel chain that bore his last name, was standing there, flawless in a light grey suit, a leather folder under his arm, and a faint smile on his lips. But what stood out most at that moment was his gaze. His blue-grey eyes, usually cold and impassive, now seemed fixed on something he couldn't quite understand. He looked at her, like he was seeing a living painting rise from the floor. Valeria, embarrassed, lowered her eyes and tried to step back. "I'm really sorry again. I didn't see you coming. I'll clean this up right now." He stepped aside, moving away from the rug but keeping his eyes on her. "Have you worked here long?" The question caught her off guard. 2 years, sir." "Will, you can call me Will," he replied, still intrigued. Valeria didn't know how to react. That conversation didn't make sense. Why was a man like him, so elegant and far removed from her world, standing there talking to her as if he were genuinely interested? Before she could say anything, the supervisor's voice echoed over the radio again. "Valeria, where are you? The CEO wants the hall ready in 5 minutes." She turned abruptly, grabbed the bucket with trembling hands and stammered, "Sorry, I have to get back to work." Will watched as she hurried away, as if trying to disappear into her own uniform. But he remained there, motionless for a few moments, still holding that image in his eyes. A woman kneeling, embarrassed, yet with a quiet beauty that no diamond in his collection had ever reflected. "Who is she?" he asked a nearby employee. The guy answered without much thought, "Cleaning lady, I think her name's Valeria." Will just murmured, almost to himself, "Valeria?" At that moment, without her knowing, something had changed. The collision she wanted to forget had actually awakened something in him, something he couldn't even name yet. The ballroom at the Lancaster Grand Hotel looked stunning that gala night. Crystal chandeliers reflected golden light over, spotless tables draped in linen cloths and decorated with exotic floral arrangements. Voices echoed in polite tones, laughter was restrained, and everyone there knew exactly which role to play. Designer dresses, tailored suits, haughty glances. It was Chicago's elite gathered for another charity event that, in truth, served more to show off than to help. On the other side of that world, nearly invisible, Valeria Cruz moved in silence, as if apologizing for existing. She wore the grey cleaning staff uniform, simple, with no embroidered name, but impeccably clean. Her brown hair was tied back in a rushed bun, and her hands were protected by gloves, already stained from the day's work. She was crouched in the corner of the main hall, trying to discreetly wipe a drop of wine that had slipped from someone's glass moments earlier. She was so focused on scrubbing the stain carefully, without disturbing the parade of expensive heels, that she didn't notice William Lancaster approaching. He was walking back into the ballroom after taking a phone call in the lobby. Tall, imposing, custom-tailored dark blue suit, white shirt, luxury watch on his wrist. His blue-grey eyes scanned the room with that look of someone always in control, until suddenly everything went off script. Valeria stood up quickly, turning with the cloth still in her hand, and then she bumped hard into his body. A sharp sound, a glass of red wine slipped from William's hand and shattered on the floor. The liquid instantly stained his shirt, turning the white into scandalous shades of red. The ballroom went silent. The murmurs stopped like magic. Some people turned around, others simply frowned in disdain. A nearby socialite covered her mouth in shock, as if she had witnessed a crime. A waiter froze in the middle of the room. Valeria's team leader, standing in the corner, rolled her eyes in fury. Valeria felt her face burn. Her eyes widened. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She just muttered, "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't see you." Her voice was weak, almost pleading. She lowered her head, expecting a lecture, humiliation. She knew how these things usually ended. She had seen co-workers lose their jobs for less. But to everyone's surprise, especially her own, William simply looked at the stain, then at her face. His eyes met hers. For a moment, he forgot where he was. That face. There was something about this woman. A quiet beauty, not obvious, almost. Suffocated by exhaustion, but present, real. And in her big brown eyes, he saw not just the fear of a cleaning lady, but an entire soul, alive, pulsing behind everything. He took a deep breath. "It's all right, don't worry." The simple phrase dropped like muffled thunder. Some guests frowned. Valeria's supervisor was left speechless. Even she took a moment to understand. "I'm really sorry. I'll clean this up right now." "Sir," she said, kneeling quickly, trying to fix the mess. William knelt down too, which caused even more shock around them. He lightly touched her wrist to stop her. "Let someone else handle it. Are you okay?" She looked at him, stunned. "Yes, I'm sorry again." He stood up slowly, the stain obvious on his shirt, but not a trace of irritation on his face. He took his jacket and covered the front of his shirt. He smiled gently, almost imperceptibly. "Have a good night," and walked away, leaving behind a trail of confused looks and scandalized whispers. Valeria stayed kneeling for a moment, frozen. She didn't know what had just happened. She only knew that she hadn't been humiliated, and that in itself was unprecedented. The next day, the sparkle of the ballroom had faded, but the echoes of the accident still whispered through the golden hallways of the Lancaster Grand Hotel. Valeria arrived early for her morning shift, as she always did. Her uniform was clean, her hair tied back, and there was an attempt at calm on her face. But something in the air was different, the looks, the restrained smiles, the conversations that stopped when she passed. In the locker room, while putting her bag away in the rusty locker, she heard the voice of Sandra, one of the oldest housekeepers. "Did you see what she did yesterday? Bumped into the owner like she was at home. And the worst part," added another, "is that he didn't even scold her. Just shows what a distraction she is." Valeria didn't respond. She just adjusted her badge and walked out with her head held high, even though something inside her felt like it was breaking. When she arrived at the cleaning department, her supervisor, Amanda Lewis, a white woman, strict, with a sharp voice, and a smile that felt more like a threat, was waiting with arms crossed and a clipboard in hand. "Miss Cruz, I see you decided to show up." Valeria replied calmly, trying to stay composed. "Yes, like every day. I'm ready for today's tasks." Amanda narrowed her eyes. "Great, then you won't mind switching departments. Starting today, you're on the laundry team, basement level." Valeria blinked, surprised. "Excuse me, I've always worked on the hall and room staff." "Yes, and after the little show you put on yesterday, I thought it best to spare you from future embarrassment. And frankly, that kind of attention doesn't fit with the refined atmosphere of our hotel. But it was an accident, Ms. Lewis. And Mr. Lancaster himself said it was fine, of course," Amanda interrupted, lowering her voice and smiling with venom. "But don't be fooled. Appearances must be maintained." Valeria felt her stomach sink. She looked around. Some co-workers looked away. Others watched her with a mix of pity and relief that it wasn't them. She took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and nodded. Understood. Hours later, Valeria was already in the back of the hotel, in a stuffy space that smelled of bleach and steam. Bed linens and towels piled up in metal carts. It was harder work, more invisible, and purposefully out of guests' sight. There, between loud machines and windowless walls, she moved with the same care as always, but now with a new weight on her shoulders. Meanwhile, in one of the executive lounges on the 15th floor, William Lancaster sipped cold coffee while pretending to read reports. In reality, his thoughts were stuck on an image he couldn't forget: Valeria's eyes that night, the shame, the strength, the way she bowed without losing her dignity. He typed a note on his phone to himself. Find out employee's name. Check her situation. But he didn't press send. Instead, he looked out the window at the city below, and for the first time in a long while, he wondered what life was like for the people who cleaned the places where he gave speeches about charity. In the laundry room, Valeria folded a sheet with trembling hands. She knew they were trying to erase her. She knew this reassignment was a subtle punishment for something that never should have been seen as a threat. But there, in that hot basement, she made a silent promise. They can try to hide me, but they won't break me. And it was in that moment, between the smell of soap and the hum of machines, that something began to shift, not by miracle, but by resistance. And while Amanda smiled, thinking she had won, Valeria was taking the first step toward a turning point no one could have seen coming. By the end of that suffocating week in the laundry, Valeria's hands were rough, her face marked by heat and cleaning chemicals, but her dignity remained intact. She didn't complain. She simply kept going day after day, as if pushing an invisible weight with steady steps that said, I'm still here. On Saturday morning, she was called in early. One of the cafeteria workers hadn't shown up, and they needed someone to help with tray restocking. She accepted the reassignment with a silent nod, happy, at least, to be out of the basement and to see the sky through the cafeteria's wide windows. It was a more casual setting, with light-colored walls, wooden tables, and a broad view of the city. Guests sipped their breakfast coffee leisurely, laptops open and hot drinks filling the tables. During her break, Valeria, for the first time in days, took off her apron and quietly sat in an empty corner near the window. She wore a simple cream-colored blouse, jeans, and her hair down, a rare detail that gave her a lighter air. She grabbed a coffee and a cheese bread roll, which the manager had approved. For a few minutes, she just watched the city move outside, without anyone looking at her as if she were part of the furniture. That's when William walked in. He wasn't in a suit, just a light blue shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark jeans. His hair was slightly messy and his expression more human, less guarded. There were no bodyguards or protocol around him. He was just another man walking in for coffee. Valeria didn't recognize him at first. She'd only seen him once, and on that day, her nerves kept her from remembering his features clearly. Now there, without the ballroom tension or the social distance of clothing, he looked almost ordinary. He, on the other hand, recognized her the moment their eyes met, and he decided not to say anything. William ordered a black coffee and, before, sitting alone, gestured to the empty chair in front of her. "Mind if I sit?" Valeria hesitated. "Sure." He sat down, holding the cup between his hands. They were silent for a few moments. Then he said, "This view helps remind us the world keeps going, even when we feel like it stopped." She smiled, unsure what to say. "You work here, right?" he asked, watching her without seeming invasive. "Yes, but today they put me in the cafeteria. I usually work where no one sees. Sometimes the most hidden places hold the strongest people," he replied in a tone that made Valeria stop stirring her coffee. She looked at him curiously. "You talk like someone who's seen a lot." William gave a soft smile. "Maybe." "And you?" she ventured. "Do you work here too?" He chuckled, but didn't answer directly. He just took a sip of his coffee. "Let's say I know this place pretty well." "Oh, what would you do if you had a choice?" he asked suddenly. "What do you mean? If you weren't here, if you didn't have to work at this hotel, what would your dream be?" She hesitated. That wasn't a common question, not for someone like her, but she answered honestly, "Study nursing. I like taking care of people. My dad used to say hands like mine, rough like this, were made to heal." William looked down for a moment. That touched him more than he expected. "Is your father still around?" Valeria shook her head. "He passed away 3 years ago, cancer. I gave up everything to care for him. Since then, I never went back to school." A heavy silence followed. William took a deep breath. "Maybe the world needs more people like you." She looked at him, surprised by the comment. "What do you mean? People who care, who don't give up on others, who even when hurt still clean up what others leave behind." Valeria smiled, for the first time in days, a real smile, but she didn't say anything. He finished his coffee, stood up, and said calmly, "It was nice talking to you. Take care, okay?" "You too." And he left, leaving Valeria with her heart strangely warm and a strange feeling that the encounter hadn't been a coincidence. She didn't know yet, but the man who had spoken to her as an equal was the same one everyone else looked up to. And when she found out, nothing would be the same again. Valeria spent the next few days replaying that cafeteria conversation in her head. His words, so unlikely in that environment, echoed in her mind like something spoken from another world. "Maybe the world needs more people like you." No one had ever said that to her before. It was the kind of phrase you keep in your heart like a jewel. She didn't know his name. She didn't know who that man with sad eyes and a quiet smile really was, someone who spoke as if he truly saw her. But she thought about him, more than she wanted to admit. On Friday afternoon, while helping organize a corporate event in the hotel's marble hall, Valeria was carrying boxes of supplies when she overheard a group of waiters chatting near the service door. "The boss is giving a speech today," said one, laughing. "That guy's the real owner of everything, only shows up when the press is around." "William Lancaster?" asked another. "He's cold, but he's got presence. They say he's about to take over the whole company." Valeria stopped for a moment. The name froze her blood. William. She turned discreetly and looked toward the stage. And there he was, exactly like at the cafe, but now in a flawless dark suit, surrounded by advisors, cameras, and microphones. She felt her stomach turn. Her heart was pounding in her ears. Everything he hadn't said was now glaringly obvious right in front of her. The man who had sat with her, sipping coffee as if they were equals, was the heir to the hotel. The same hotel that had pushed her into the laundry room. The same hotel where she was just another shadow scrubbing floors not to be seen. And he had pretended not to be who he was. The indignation came fast, like a flash of fire. Valeria dropped the boxes right there and left through the emergency stairs. The air felt heavier outside. She walked aimlessly until she stopped under an awning, the cold wind cutting her skin and the anger pressing against her chest. At the end of the shift, William found her sitting on a concrete bench behind the building, near the staff parking lot. Her hood was up, hands folded in her lap, but her teary eyes gave everything away. "Valeria," he said, approaching cautiously. She slowly lifted her face. Her eyes were different now. There was hardness in them. "You lied to me." William stopped a few steps away. "I just didn't tell you who I was. That's the same as lying. I wanted to get to know you, without the weight of my name." She laughed bitterly. "But you already knew mine. You knew where I worked, what I did, and you listened to me like you were just a regular man, when in fact you owned everything around me. I didn't want you to see me that way," he said sincerely. "With you, I felt human, for the first time in a long time." Valeria stood up. "You studied me, William, like some poor person curiosity, like someone who's only worth something. As long as she intrigues you." "That's not true. You have to believe me." "No, I don't need anything from you." He tried to step closer, but she stepped back. "You know what it's like to wake up at 5 in the morning and still be treated like you're a walking mistake? No. And for a second, for one moment, I thought you were different." Silence fell between them. The distant sound of cars on the avenue and the wind sweeping dried leaves were the only witnesses. Valeria turned her back and walked away without looking back. William stood still, alone, feeling for the first time in his life the real weight of the inequality he'd never truly seen before. He had lost the only authentic thing he'd found in that world of glass and polish, and now he understood that he couldn't buy it back. But he wasn't ready to give up. The following days were filled with a sharp silence. Valeria avoided crossing paths with William in the hotel hallways, and he, though trying to find a moment to explain, felt the heavy weight of the distance. Not just from her, but from a truth he could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, Amanda Lewis, the supervisor, watched it all with cold eyes. She noticed the change in the heir's gaze and felt her authority threatened by something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was envy, maybe fear of losing control, or maybe it was pure pleasure in crushing what little dignity remained in a woman who had dared to be seen. On Tuesday morning, Valeria arrived in the locker room to find an odd atmosphere. The looks were more pointed, the conversations more hushed. As soon as she stepped into the service hallway, she was approached by 2 internal security guards. "Miss Cruz, we need you to come with us to the management office." She stopped, confused. "Did something happen?" "We've received a formal complaint. Please." She felt her blood run cold. Upon entering the administration office, she found Amanda already seated, a folder in front of her, and 2 members of the hotel's legal department beside her. Everything was meticulously staged. "Valeria," Amanda began with a polished and forced voice, "we've received a report that valuable items went missing from Suite 1703, the same one you were near last week." "Excuse me." "What?" she replied, stunned. "Mrs. Patel, an international guest, reported a missing necklace and gold bracelet. Security footage shows you entering and leaving that floor." Valeria's eyes widened. "I only cleaned the hallway. I never entered that suite." Amanda opened the folder and slid some photos across the table. Images of Valeria pushing the cleaning cart, passing by the door. No solid evidence, just suggestion. "This is ridiculous. You all know I would never..." "Please lower your voice, Miss Cruz," one of the lawyers said coldly. "The decision has already been made. Your contract is terminated effective immediately. We ask that you return your badge and exit through the service area." Valeria stood frozen for a moment, trying to process the speed of the injustice. A deathly silence filled the room. Amanda seemed to savor every second of the humiliation. Suddenly, the door opened. William walked in, his face tense, his voice firm. "What's going on here?" Amanda stood with false surprise. "Mr. Lancaster, we're just following protocol in light of a serious allegation." William looked at Valeria. Her expression was a battlefield. Hurt, anger, dignity. "This is a mistake. This woman wouldn't do that." One of the lawyers stood up. "Sir, with all due respect, the board was clear that you're not to be involved. In administrative matters, we ask that you trust the process." William turned to Amanda. "Where's the proof? Showing her in the hallway doesn't mean anything." Amanda replied with a cruel smile. "And what do you suggest? That she keeps working here like nothing happened? The hotel's image. You all care so much about image that you'd rather trample the truth," Valeria said with a firm voice. She looked directly at William. "Now I understand. No matter what I do, I'll always be the mistake you try to hide." "Valeria, please." She removed her badge and calmly placed it on the table. "You don't need to defend me, William. You belong in this place. I don't. Now I know where I stand." She turned and walked out of the room in front of everyone, without lowering her head. She didn't leave as someone guilty, but as someone who had been knocked down so many times by life that she'd learned how to walk away standing tall. William stood still, watching the door close. One of the security guards cleared his throat, waiting for orders. But William said nothing, because in that moment he knew something had been broken, and the truth wasn't in that room. It was in her eyes, in her steady steps, and in the quiet sound of a badge being returned by someone who already had more honor than everyone else there combined. The sharp autumn wind swept through the gray streets of Bridgeview, a neighborhood far from downtown Chicago, where sirens didn't scream and buildings didn't shine. There, between peeling wooden fences and sidewalks cracked by time, Valeria Cruz started over, without fanfare, without an audience, without a uniform. Just her, the cold, and the need to keep going. After the public humiliation at the hotel, she spent 3 days shut in, locked inside the tiny rented room behind Mrs. Marlene's house, a Dominican lady who rented rooms to immigrant women. The space was cramped, a mattress pushed against the wall, a shelf with old books, and a window that creaked when the wind blew. But it was clean. It was safe. When the pain began turning into necessity, Valeria went looking for work and found a job as an elderly caregiver in a small, faded painted house with a porch and rocking chairs, where Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, an 84-year-old woman, lived alone and forgotten by her children, who paid a modest wage in exchange for daily care. The first time Valeria walked through that gate, she felt something strange, as if the front steps were more alive than the hotel hallways she used to polish on her knees. Mrs. Agnes had hair as fine as cobwebs, almost colorless gray eyes, and skin pale like aged porcelain. She spoke slowly, sometimes forgot names, sometimes mixed up morning with night. But there was a tired sweetness in her that quietly touched Valeria. She cleaned the floor with lavender soap, rubbed cream onto the old woman's thin legs, combed her hair with careful fingers. And in the silence of that old house, she listened to stories, confessions, whispered songs from a time when TV was still black and white. One orange-tinged afternoon, while helping her walk to the porch, Valeria heard a compliment that broke her. "You've got good hands, girl. Hands that know how to heal." She paused, eyes full of tears. "My dad used to say that too." "Then listen to him." The dead know more about life than the living. That night, while Mrs. Agnes slept, in her room lined with old photographs, Valeria stared at the screen of a borrowed laptop, hesitant. She took a deep breath and clicked enroll for a night course in community nursing at a local school. 12 monthly payments. She didn't know if she could pay it all, but for the first time, she didn't think about fear. She thought about purpose. Meanwhile, the city pulsed at a different frequency on the other side, where William Lancaster lived. Since the day he saw Valeria walk out of the hotel administration office, William had sunk into a silence even deeper than hers. He spent his mornings in dull meetings, but his mind wandered. His nights were spent staring at the city through glass windows, as if hoping something out there might give him answers he'd never found inside the office. In the luxurious penthouse he inherited from his grandfather, the furniture was flawless, but the space was sterile. The marble said nothing. The modern art pieces seemed to mock his confusion, and every time he looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, he saw a man dressed in power, but hollow. "You studied me like some poor person curiosity." That line from Valeria cut through him like a knife every time he tried to forget. His parents tried to distract him with trips, proposals to expand the hotel chain to the West Coast, meetings with investors, but he no longer wanted to wear the obedient heir's skin. He started skipping obligations. He wrote in yellowed notebooks, read books on philosophy and psychology as if trying to understand why he had been so blind before. He spent entire afternoons in suburban cafes, trying to feel the city with his own feet, not through reports. On one of those grey days, he saw from a bus window a woman pushing a wheelchair down a bumpy sidewalk. Her hair was tied up, and there was a gentle way she guided the elderly woman down the street. His heart stopped for a moment. It wasn't Valeria, but it could have been. And in that moment, William understood. He didn't need a new business. He needed a new perspective, one that didn't descend from the top, but slowly rose from the ground up. That morning, under a cloudy sky, Valeria adjusted the blanket over Mrs. Agnes's legs while the television murmured in the background. It was a local program, broadcast by a community channel in the city. The reporter was talking about inspiring stories of everyday workers making a difference in their communities, part of a campaign called Invisible Hearts, aimed at recognizing the people who kept the country running without ever appearing on magazine covers. Valeria, as usual, paid more attention to the tea water than the screen, but when she heard the word caregiver, she looked up, curious. The screen changed to show a young woman with brown hair tied in a simple bun, wearing a beige coat, and holding a mug in her hands. The interview was shot close up, and her face was intentionally blurred. But the voice was unmistakable. "I used to be a cleaning staff member at a luxury hotel," Valeria said, nervous but steady. "I was accused of something I didn't do. They took away my job, took away my voice, but I didn't let them take my dignity." Mrs. Agnes slowly turned her head. "Isn't that you?" Valeria smiled, a little embarrassed. "They asked me to keep it anonymous. They said it might inspire other people." The reporter continued. "Today, she studies nursing at night and works as a caregiver during the day. Her story has spread through online worker support groups and already reached over 100,000 views in just 2 days." On the other side of the city, in a small corner cafe, William almost dropped his coffee when he heard that same voice. He had his headphones in, tuned to the news, while waiting for a client who had never shown up. He stood up suddenly and rushed back to his apartment. On his laptop, he typed "wrongfully accused hotel maid interview," and within seconds found the video. He watched without blinking. It wasn't just a story of injustice. It was a portrait of a woman who had fallen, but refused to stay down. Someone who had been forgotten by the system, stepped on by the elite, silenced by those who believed they held power, and still rebuilt her life with dignity. He heard her talk about the grandmother who taught her never to lower her head, about the fear of being nobody, about how she learned to listen to others' silence because she herself had lived in silence for years. "I don't want pity. I want respect," she said. "Even if I'm cleaning floors, my value isn't defined by that. I know who I am." William ran his hand over his face. It felt like a punch to the chest because he had helped take away her voice. And now he was hearing her strength come back like a muffled scream breaking through. He grabbed his phone and called his father. "Did you see this?" he asked, straight to the point. "William, please, that's just tabloid media, not something for a Lancaster to concern himself with. That's exactly why you'll never understand what we lost." He hung up. In the days that followed, the story spread. Alternative news websites reshared the interview. Social media groups began posting clips of the video with captions like "The voice of the invisible" and "She wasn't broken." Valeria quietly started receiving notes left by neighbors in her mailbox. Small gestures of kindness, a bouquet left at her door, an envelope with 3 $20 bills and a note, "Your courage gave me strength to keep going." A single mother. But what she didn't expect was the brown envelope that appeared one day under her door. No return address. Inside, a handwritten letter, firm handwriting. "You taught me how to see the world, and for the first time I truly saw." At the bottom, no signature, just a sentence. "I'm trying to become someone you would respect." Valeria held the paper for a long time, her heart racing, hands trembling. She knew who it was from, and she wasn't ready to forgive. But also, she couldn't bring herself to hate him anymore. Valeria was holding the anonymous letter between her fingers, sitting on Mrs. Agnes's porch when her phone buzzed. Another notification, a new email, another invitation. Over the last few days, podcast producers, independent journalists, and even advertising agencies had reached out offering partnerships, interviews, and impact opportunities. "You could be the voice of an invisible generation," they said. "You have the potential to become one of the biggest social cause influencers. All you need to do is say yes and let us handle your image." But Valeria didn't want image. She wanted truth. She wanted peace. That very night, she declined all the invitations, deleted the messages with steady hands and tired eyes. Then she washed the dishes in silence and went back to reviewing her anatomy workbook. Meanwhile, high above in the financial district of Chicago, a boardroom on the 21st floor boiled with tension. William Lancaster stood at the head of a large oak table. In front of him, his father, Charles Lancaster, co-founder in a flawless navy blue suit, cold gaze. Beside him, 3 lawyers, the hotel chain's CFO, and Amanda Lewis, always ready with her political smile. "You've lost your mind," Charles said. "You're willing to stain our family's name over a cleaning lady. Over an innocent woman who was wronged by our system." "Yes, I am," William answered, voice steady. "This is emotional blackmail. The media doesn't even know her name. We can ignore it, but I know her name, and if you won't do anything, I will." Amanda crossed her arms. "William, you have no idea what you're proposing. Publicly apologizing for a supposed internal injustice could open the door to a flood of lawsuits." "Then let the flood come." His father slammed his hand on the table. "You're going to throw away everything we've built?" William took a deep breath. His eyes were misty, but his tone was unshakable. "I don't want what you've built. I want something that matters. Selling rooms for thousands of dollars while people like Valeria are shoved into the basement? That's not a legacy. That's vanity." Silence. "I'm selling my share of the company," he continued. "The papers are already being prepared. I'm going to use the money to build something that acts as a bridge, not a wall. And what exactly are you going to build, William? Amanda sneered. He looked at her calmly. Something your money can't buy, dignity. He turned and walked out, not waiting for a response. That same night, back at his apartment, William recorded a short video. Fixed camera, neutral background. No makeup, no cuts, just him. A few months ago, an employee at our hotel was wrongfully fired. She wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was a woman with a name, a story, and dreams. And she was treated like a mistake. I allowed that, and I'm here to say I was wrong. The video was posted to his personal social media accounts. In less than 24 hours, it reached millions of views. The next day, Valeria came home from her night class and found Mrs. Agnes's front door surrounded by flowers, letters, and cameras. A neighbor pulled her aside. Your name came out, and it came out beautifully. Shocked, Valeria rushed inside, opened her phone, and found William's video. She watched it with her heart pounding. His words were simple, but full of truth. For the first time, he wasn't speaking like an heir, but like a man, like a human being. When she finished watching, her eyes filled with tears. But she didn't smile. She just sat down, placed her hands on her lap, and whispered to herself, "It's not about fame. It's about justice." Outside, the flashes kept going, but Valeria remained firm in her decision. She didn't want followers. She wanted a future, and she didn't yet know it. But the choices she would make in the days ahead would change everything, including what she felt for the man who had finally chosen to step down from the pedestal. Spring had arrived quietly in Bridgeview. The trumpet trees were beginning to bloom along the sidewalks. The wind no longer stung as much, and the smell of wet grass mixed with the soft aroma of chamomile tea that Valeria made every afternoon for Mrs. Agnes. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Valeria wore her simple caregiver uniform, her hair tied back in a loose braid. On her lap, she reviewed notes from her nursing course, marking the parts she needed to focus on with a blue pen. Mrs. Agnes was asleep in her armchair, covered to her shoulders with a light blue blanket. The old radio played an instrumental song that filled the house with a soft, nostalgic melancholy. Then she heard the doorbell. She wasn't expecting visitors. She walked to the door with steady steps, her heart strangely alert. When she opened it, she froze. There, standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets and eyes heavy with silence, was William. He didn't bring flowers. There was no luxury car parked nearby, no suit. He wore dark jeans, a grey hoodie, and his hair was a little longer than before. He looked simpler, more real, more like a man. Valeria tightened her grip on the doorknob. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice hoarse. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at him. Her eyes still held caution. But there was no more pain, only a wall of questions. "May I come in?" he asked calmly. Valeria hesitated for a second and then stepped aside. William entered slowly, respecting the space, glancing around as if not wanting to disturb anything. He saw Mrs. Agnes asleep in the armchair, and his expression softened. "Is she doing okay?" he asked. Valeria nodded. "She had a good day." Silence. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. She crossed her arms. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, eyes down, trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking about this moment for a long time. And how? I don't deserve it, but I'm here anyway." Valeria stayed quiet. William continued. "I sold my share of the company, all the hotels, my entire stake. The paperwork was signed last month." She raised her eyebrows slightly, surprised, but said nothing. "With the money, I'm starting a housing and job training project for workers at risk. People like you. People who carry the country on their backs." He took a deep breath and looked straight at her. "You taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by their job title. I spent my whole life thinking success meant power. You showed me real success is making the world a little fairer than it was when we arrived. Valeria felt her eyes start to sting, but she held strong. William moved a little closer. I'm not here to apologize again. Words aren't enough. I'm here because, after everything, after losing you, I realized what I truly want. He paused. His eyes were filled with tears. I can finally begin, Valeria. But I only want to if it's with you. She lowered her eyes. A silent tear fell, sliding slowly down her cheek. For several seconds that felt like minutes. She said nothing. She just took a deep breath, as if scanning her own heart from the inside. Then she lifted her face and, for the first time in a long while, smiled. It wasn't a wide smile. It was the kind that forms slowly, shyly, starting in the eyes before reaching the lips. But it was real. You took your time to understand, she said gently. But you got here. William smiled too, with relief. In his eyes, Mrs. Agnes, still half asleep, opened her eyes in the armchair and murmured, "Who's the handsome young man in the kitchen?" Valeria wiped the tear from her cheek with the back of her hand and replied with a subtle glow, "Someone who decided to start over." Months later, a sunny afternoon lit up the newly renovated community center in the little village neighborhood of Chicago. Children ran through the courtyard, voices mixed with laughter, and a group of adults listened attentively to a workshop on job retraining. On the walls, posters announced nursing courses, cooking classes, building maintenance training, and language programs. On a simple wooden sign written in bold, clear letters, Roots Project, dignity begins with opportunity. In the center of the room, Valeria handed out certificates to a group of women. Some wore simple uniforms, others held babies in their arms. All of them smiled with the eyes of someone who, for the first time, believed it was possible. William watched from a distance, leaning against one of the columns, not drawing attention. He exchanged subtle glances with Valeria. No more words were needed. Between them was a solid foundation made of invisible bricks: trust, respect, time, and choice. That day, there was no gala audience, no flashing lights. But there was purpose. Later, sitting on a wooden bench under a tree in the center's backyard, William held a folder with new proposals for expanding the project. Valeria flipped through it slowly, eyes focused. "Are you sure you want to take this to Detroit?" she asked. "I am. Then St. Louis, then New Orleans. Wherever there are forgotten people will plant roots." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. In the background, the camera slowly pulls away, and Valeria's voice comes in as a voiceover. Steady, calm, as if she were speaking not just to the audience, but to every version of herself that had been silenced throughout her life. He didn't fall in love with the woman who cleaned the floors. He fell for someone who wouldn't bow, even when on her knees. True love doesn't fall for the shine, but for the light that endures in the dark. As the image gently fades to black, we see quick cuts of other women and men being welcomed into the project. A cleaner signing up for a business administration course. A gardener handing in his first printed resume. A cook showing her diploma to her daughter. William and Valeria never ended up on magazine covers. They didn't give interviews on talk shows. They didn't publish books or release documentaries. But they changed stories. And in the end, they made one thing clear. They weren't interested in fame, but in turning the silence of so many into a voice, and the floor that once felt like punishment into fertile ground for a new beginning. And now tell me, what did you think of this story? On a scale from 0 to 10, how much did it move you? Leave your rating in the comments. It really helps us understand what you feel and want to see more of here. If you liked it, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like this. And before you go, I've picked another touching story that will move your heart even more. It's worth watching.